Recording in progress.
Hold on. Let me let people in. Judy. What are you doing? There's no admit button. Hmm. That's a first.
And not any of
Yeah, right.
Heather's good at this.
Well, normally there's a button right there that says admit.
Can't even kick her out either.
Literally trying. No, I X'd out of it to hopefully pull it up and see that there's an admit button. But every time I click, I gotta wait 30 seconds for it to pop up. Viv, I'm gonna get you trained so that you can control the whole Zoom thing.
Really reminds me. It's so frustrating.
It's just Judy and Charles, but I can't get the participants box to pop back up, and there's still no. Text Judy and ask her to get out and then come back in. And then hope. Oh,
Just no, I'll call her.
oh, wait.
Better.
Maybe.
Cameron, yeah, where would I find the wording for the current emergency contingency fund? Does that exist somewhere?
I can give you what the Warren article was last year.
Call her.
Nope, she's in.
That says it.
They're in. Oh. I'm gonna have to look that up.
What are you looking for? Where is it written? The rules or the guidelines of using the emergency fund. There is nothing in writing that I know of. Okay. Thank you.
It's not in our SOPs or our SOGs or whatever we call it now.
Standard operating procedures. You're saying it's in there?
No, I said it's not in there.
Yeah.
So
okay, not in writing anymore.
the understanding is that it's typically used to cover unexpected expenses or overages. All right, I believe we're good. They're in the room and there's nobody else, so.
All right, you think we're good to go?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to call this regular meeting back to order. It's a continuation of the March. What was March 12th select board meeting. Calling to order at 5:07 p.m. The chair of the board is here, but he's not feeling.
I felt quality. It's best if Sandra does it.
It's I'm going to speak for him and he's gonna snap if I'm messing up. Old business. We are going to continue our review of the 2024-2025 municipal budget and make our recommendations. At the last meeting, we got through the general government Administration and municipal center, so. Through to the end, no, I don't know, do you have another copy, Cameron?
She's still to be in here.
Still yours. That's got another copy.
Um. So page 5,
Oops.
thank goodness for better. We completed it through page 5, so we are now on page 6, which is public safety, fire. And this will put out there for anybody who's watching, this budget, proposed by the town manager, it has gone through the scrutiny of the budget committee and they have made their recommendations. So now it is to us at the select board, and there will be 2 public hearings at which the community, we encourage people to attend, we encourage people to share their thoughts, their ideas, ask questions. This budget will not be finalized on the warrant articles until we have had 2 public hearings in which we really hope to get input from the community. So public safety, fire. Does anybody have anything that they would like to review or make recommendations to?
Under supplies, 503,380. I was just wondering, is there like a specific tool that we're investing in? I was just wondering why the increase.
So if you notice, every other department has a supply line.
Mhm.
And the majority of supplies for fire are tools. Like foam or other tools that they use on a regular basis, but they don't actually have a supply line. Whereas if you look at admin, or you look at rescue, or you look at any other department, the library, they've got a general supply line.
Mhm.
So the increase to that was essentially to allow us to put supplies in a line that makes sense, rather than putting everything under fire equipment maintenance and repair. And you'll notice that fire equipment maintenance and repair was reduced from 15,000 to 7,500. So it was moved from there and put into this tools line.
Thank you.
Any other questions or recommendations? Okay. Seeing none at this time, we will move to public safety rescue, which is on page 7. Does anyone have any questions or recommendations?
Would it be a similar thing under supplies for the office? That we're just creating a line there because I see it says 0.
Yeah, there was
Budget.
not an office supply line. So when they order paper, it's getting lumped up into an account so basically this year, as they buy office supplies, I'm putting it in office.
Mhm.
But last year there wasn't a separate line for it. So for bookkeeping purposes and for me to propose future budgets, it's easier to have a line that I can designate that to, instead of looking like we're over in one line and
Yeah.
really.
So, go ahead.
With that said, before the meeting started, and I've said it in other meetings, that manager line or that manager column was adjusted because my first calculation on this line was wrong for wages. I did not correct FICA and Medicare, so I do need to recalculate those.
Okay. So looking at this, when the town manager initially gave a figure, it was, so the column says 2025 initial, it would be $267,000. When this then went to the budget committee, they recommended an adjustment to include an increase in the on-call wages, which added $3,744 to that initial budget, bringing it to $270,744. So if we want to, and I'll use the words, keep the spirit of the recommendation of the committee, we should add $3,744 to the amount in the 2025 manager column, which makes the committee recommendation $293,444. You say that, which the final number, $293,444.
I did ask the budget committee if they wanted to adjust. The reason I didn't adjust that was because they haven't voted on the correct number. So I don't know if Peter and the budget committee plans on meeting before.
I think this could be a case where we've three of us have discussed it and fine with it.
Okay,
We don't have a scheduled meeting. We plan to attend the hearings.
I just didn't want to make assumptions for anyone.
No, it's the spirit of it in place, and
So certainly, if other members of the budget committee feel that I've spoken in error, they could reach out and we will publicly acknowledge that. But you're
all unanimously in favor of increase, which we hope will reduce to give more incentive to local people. When that costs us less and creating more local income.
So Cameron, before you begin calculating like that and all that, I wanted to propose a recommendation. It is my understanding that these wages did not include a specific allowance for doing transfers. And as we have 2 ambulances available, that it could behoove us financially to look at times to put on a schedule, a crew when we have the opportunity to do a transfer, and then that would generate revenue. But in order to be able to schedule for transfers, we need to first have the money in the budget to pay those people. From the information that I gathered, my suggestion would be to add $10,000 to the wages. The piece to that is that in revenue, if we were to spend $10,000 on wages for transfers, we could safely predict that we would bring in at least $15,000 in revenue. And certainly if we did not do $10,000 worth of hiring people for transfers, paying wages for transfers, then that $15,000 would be proportionally less. It seems to me that we should allow the opportunity to generate revenue if there are employees willing to do those transfers. Questions? Yes.
Maybe this is a question for the town manager. The reason this was not put in the budget originally, there's some reason for not wanting to increase the number.
Because I proposed an operational budget for 911 services, and then after everything was presented, we started discussing, because at the time when I wrote this budget, 451 was out of commission, we weren't doing transfers. Since the changeover at rescue, we've been very selective, we've probably only done 2 or 3. But if we're looking to offset the costs of rescue and be able to do those transfers, I can't pull out of my operational budget for 911 coverage to send somebody up to Augusta to bring somebody down to Portland.
There was this discussion either last year or the year before about cutting back on the transfers because they took more time. They just one down to town, close by. And the wear and tear on equipment and actually more the hours and wage. Is that concern going away?
I think that, that is definitely a concern, and as I look back historically at, some of the issues. It would be important that we agree only to do transfers where we know that we will be paid. We don't want to do a transfer for somebody who does not have insurance, or we don't want to agree to do a transfer. Outside of the community, am I saying that right? If it's somebody who perhaps does not have the funds or does not have insurance or does not have main care. And the other piece would be to look at how far we have to travel. Versus what we should be reimbursed, that it would be important that we don't agree to do a transfer. And again, this is outside of the community. Of course, we will always transfer our community members, but to do a transport, if it would not be financially beneficial.
Is there, the reimbursements have anything to do with the distance we travel or is it a flat amount?
It depends on the insurance. If we base this estimate, because Sandra had asked me the question, so I'd done math and given it to her. If I go with the lowest possible reimbursement rate, which would be Medicare, which is the majority of the people that we not the majority, but because if we do life flight, it's guaranteed pay. If we do some of the hospitals, it's guaranteed pay, because the hospital's paying it. But if it is Medicare as the provider, so basically, depending on how long the transfer was, which I've expressed to the chief and to the select board that we're not going to Fort Kent because it doesn't make much sense. I mean, unless we're going to bring in, $5,000 to $6,000 for that transfer, it doesn't make any financial sense for us. So what I'm using for a calculation to come up with the wage line, because again, we can't spend it unless we have it, is $700 reimbursement for a transfer. So then you take the average wage of our employees times 2, because there's 2 in a crew. And I just I think we had done worst case scenarios like 6 hours, which most of them are going to be quicker than that because a lot of them are Stevens to CMMC and back or vice versa or whatever. They're relatively quick. But if we did 20 and we're using 10 grand because we're hoping we could potentially allow to do more if possible. But if we did 26 at the $700 for that crew, I think we would expend, what did we say, $6,500, and we'd bring in roughly $18,000 in revenue. So that covers wear, tear, and revenue coming into the department.
Saying in the line, I think that it's a flat fee.
Medicare says it's flat because Medicare pays what Medicare pays. Insurance companies, it differs. We have agreements with the billing company and different insurances that pay different rates. We have a fee schedule that we bill out, but if we have agreements with insurance companies, it's like in-network stuff. You have negotiated rates.
Average case is fixed, not very mean.
I don't know if you can do average because we can't predict.
Well,
But if we go by the lowest common
educated guess.
Well, and that's why I didn't go with average. I went with the worst case scenario, which is Medicare at $700.
Yeah. Okay, well, I would hope that set up the maximum radius.
Yes, it is important that we set the parameters to make sure that anything we do.
So without factoring in gas and wear and tear, that $700 transfer in wages, if it went 6 hours, it would cost us $214.
Include the insurance.
The insurance cost for rescue is relatively minimal. None of my employees have insurance.
I meant the fight.
Oh, FICA and Medicare, sorry, what did I just say that was? 85.
Percentage.
So $12 in FICA and we'll just say $4 in Medicare, so you're talking 225 bucks.
That's good, I just think a radius makes sense, and I would. Rather than say the maximum 6 hours, I think it's good to be predictable and say, here's a service. And not with that, it's here, so.
And that's how we operate now. If I get a call, and Bob knows this, if I get a call for a transfer from Fort Kent to Mass General, I tell the chief no,
So what's the service there?
300 miles, so what, Bangor? But then again, if Bangor is gonna pay us $700 and we can go up to Fort Kent and make 5,000, it makes more sense to drive up to Fort Kent.
Point of order, if what I'm hearing, and I think what's important is to make sure that there are some defined parameters, and I think that we should involve the chief in setting what those should be. It would seem to me that a distance would make sense, but our chief may have other things that she would want to include, but that there should be a written policy for this, for transfers to whatever degree, and I don't think that that's something we need to
So yeah,
define right now.
we can talk about that later, because I go back to if it makes fiscal sense for the town, why would we restrict ourselves to?
But I think that that's a conversation that the chief should be a part of, and something that could be defined separately from.
And that's what I was trying to say, is me and the chief already have that agreement. 300 miles.
And then the suggestion to say that in the average case, a request would produce a lot more income to justify the mileage. I think that just should be a one-off decision. That's what we pay people to figure out the math. So a rule except when the income will be higher.
Thank you. Vivian, did you have?
I am very confused about this issue, because for the last 2 years, I have heard. We are getting away from transfers, we're not doing transfers, we're getting away from transfers, we're not doing transfers anymore, it's too expensive. We're not getting our money out of it. And I'm hearing the complete opposite right now. And I don't understand why. Hang on, I'm just saying, I don't understand. I would have to really I agree with Peter, there has to be something in writing, there has to be a radius, what happens if we're down to one ambulance, would that nullify it, so on and so forth, so I'm just gonna reserve what I have to say. It's a complete turnaround.
So is it
Without even knowing how many transfers we've done that's gone into the billing that has been left uncollected? Because that's the second piece of this, is we've also always been told that there's a certain amount of money that goes uncollected. And how much of that money that was uncollected was from doing all those transfers? So I'm just gonna say it's crazy.
So was there a question in there? Or?
No, I wanted to know now, because it will definitely come up. I'll have time to think about it.
Okay.
You guys will have time to work about it, but at the public hearing, minimally, I'll have something to say.
Okay. Are there any other questions? In regards to this.
It's kind of common, I think, I'm very impressed with Cameron done the math on. It's the business about unreimbursed is something to look at, but I mean, I don't know, I've heard what you heard in years past, but no one did the math. It's just too far, too much wear and tear. That's all I ever heard. Nobody did the math.
Although there have been no questions, I think I will address some of the concerns that I'm hearing, because before I made this recommendation, I did spend a lot of time collecting information from Cameron and doing a great deal of math. I think that my recommendation is contingent upon there being policies around transfers, that in the past, we have agreed to do transfers, we as a department, we have agreed to do transfers without first ensuring that we would be reimbursed. So if someone calls for a transfer and we did not first make sure that this transfer is covered by insurance or covered by Medicare, then that is negligent on our part. So these transfers would be based on knowing before we did the transfer that we would be reimbursed, that we need to make decisions based on each transfer being an economically sound choice. We should not do transfers that do not generate revenue for this department. And it would be my recommendation that the chief, the town manager, perhaps the budget committee, certainly the select board, and anyone else that has knowledge and understanding about the fiscal decisions about transfers be involved in putting together that policy. If we have, and this should never impact the ability to serve the town. We, at this point, have 2 ambulances available to us. If one of them were to go out of service, we certainly could not do transfers at that point. We need to have 1 ambulance in good condition, scheduled with a crew to be able to serve 911 services. And then if we have another ambulance available, if we have other crew available in a time when a transfer has been requested of us, then we could consider that. But in no way should this jeopardize the service that we're able to provide to our community. And this $10,000 amount that I'm suggesting, if that would be planned, set aside for transfers. So if we don't do transfers, that money will not be spent. This isn't set aside for something else. So the only way that would be spent is if we are generating revenue above and beyond. Not only what we spend, but what it will cost us for gas, wear and tear, anything else. So just for that clarification. That's my recommendation. Does anybody have any questions or thoughts or? Yes, Cameron.
One thing you didn't hit on is what you're proposing also results in a net negative $5,000 for the overall budget. Because you're proposing $15,000 in revenue, which means you're essentially taking $5,000 off what's going to be taxed and appropriated. I just wanted to put that out there because that was the one thing you didn't say.
Thank you.
Adjusted by the FICA. On the cost side.
That $10,000 is minimal, but I've got it budgeted in on a separate sheet. But again, my point being, you take the $10,000, you add the, I can actually tell you the exact amount because I calculated it before I came here, because I knew Sandra was going to ask this question.
And when I did the math for this, after getting the figures for Cameron, in all places, it was the lowest amount. So I would expect to generate revenue. If we spend the $10,000 in wages for transfers, I would expect our revenue to be much higher than 15. But again, you always want to plan for the lowest.
It's just a minute point, but if we're doing budget projections on revenue expenses, should have all the ones that are known, even if it's small.
Yeah, indeed.
So after factoring in FICA and Medicare, it's still what you're proposing to the revenue line is $4,235 more than what you're proposing all total. So the budget itself, when it gets taxed and appropriated, will, if this were to pass, would be $4,235 lower than the current state of where it's at with your.
So if we're able to do these transfers, that would end up
reducing
the budget. Yes.
Do you know how many transfers that is? How many It takes to generate $4,235 worth of revenue, and the other thing. Well, you just restated what you had stated the first time. Am I hearing you clearly that if you do not have insurance, we will not transport you? Because to me, that sounds like a discrimination thing. I don't know if that's the
If
case.
somebody calls 911,
Okay,
if someone in this community needs to be transported somewhere, we will transport. But when there's a phone call put out there to a number of services saying, we need somebody transported from Bangor to Portland, who wants it? We don't have to say yes,
It's
but
non-emergent.
we can say yes, and if we don't say yes, somebody else will say yes. They're just putting it out there. Who wants to do this? Who wants to make this money? Those are the things that we will say yes or no to. In an emergency situation, we will serve the community. We will, in a 911 call, no matter where they are, we're responding to a 911 call in Bangor, we're going. But if this is it optional? What's the word that I want to use?
Yeah. You don't have to take that call. I mean, they put it out there and you can set your own parameters around it at that point, you know.
so the two parameters I hear is maybe a mile radius and then an insurance requirement
Yeah,
before they're an accepted call.
Well, knowing that we're going to get paid. We don't want to say yes to a call where we may not get paid.
But that would be insurance.
If it's a 911 call, we will take every call in our community in our service area. If we are called by another service, Lifelight will pay for theirs, or anywhere else outside of our service area, and they say we got to go from here to there, and we say, who's paying for it? And they say there's no insurance, it's self-pay. We will absolutely say no, because we don't know if that person is going to pay for it or not. It makes no sense for the taxpayers of Buckfield to subsidize somebody from Farmingdale or wherever to go to Maine Med if they don't have a guaranteed way that we're going to get paid.
This is not an emergency situation.
This is a non-emergent, you're calling, I need somebody to go from this hospital, we don't have anybody to do it, can you do it? No. That person's either in the hospital or at a home, and it's not a life or death situation. And other services can pick that up. That community service that's out there, they can take it if they're able to, but we're not, what we're saying is we're not gonna go chase the possibility of generating revenue. We're going to go where we know revenue is gonna come into the town that makes the investment's gonna be returned to the town.
We're gonna spend 10 to get 15.
We will spend. We want to have 10 available to be spent. If we only do 2 transfers this year, and doing transfers is contingent upon having providers who are willing to come do this. If nobody wants to pick up shifts, then we can't do transfers. But to have $10,000, if we spend $10,000, the town, the taxpayers can safely predict that we will earn after FICA over $4,500. I would expect it to be much, much higher than that. Because if you go $15,000 minus $10,000 minus another 60 in FICA, that's what that difference is. So this would end up in a net positive for the town. Unless we don't spend any and then we'll be at 0. But if we do 1 transfer, it will make the town money. Because we are not going to do transfers for which we will not be reimbursed. We are not going to provide an elective service to another town if we will not be compensated. Elective being.
And to put this as simple as we can, if you select not to, which is well within your decision, we will not do transfers next year, because I do not have, I'm not gonna take money away from my 911 budget to chase additional revenue for the town that we haven't accepted from an operational standpoint.
So this would give us the opportunity to do transfers
if they present themselves.
if they present themselves and it's beneficial. But without this, we do not have that option. And again, this is just our recommendation at this point or not.
If we
So
spend
perhaps
10,
we'll
we
leave
could-
that, we're not voting at this moment, so perhaps we'll leave that right there for the people to think about. Is there anything else? Any other questions or recommendations in the public safety rescue budget from your one, I'm sorry,
can I?
yes, please.
So I've had Stryker here twice, for 451. We had some issues with the power load. I guess I
People listening, 451 is one of our ambulances.
correct. I think I griped enough and was able to get it rectified because it's working now, but I basically had 3 components replaced on that power load to make sure that it was operational and working properly, which the town did not get charged for. However, if any of those items were to go back, so when we first got them, there was a service contract, which between the 2 ambulances, there's a service contract on the head unit, there's a service contract on the stretcher. It comes up to roughly $3,000 a year on each of them. If something goes wrong in that, the battery goes, the hydraulics go, they come, they don't charge us for service, they replace those components. The hydraulic assembly, I believe, is upwards of a couple of grand. The batteries, $4,000. The batteries are almost $1,000. The rod was another $400. So and then when they come out to visit us, they're charging us a premium for the labor. So I just want to put it out there. I do have a proposal for a contract for those 2 units, which comes out to $3,000 a year per ambulance that I didn't put into this budget, the service contract, to make sure that we don't pay any more than $3,000 a year for maintenance. No, I got it Friday, which was when that 451 was fixed. So just something to consider while you're talking about this.
I guess really put out the suggestion of, you said a total of $6,000.
It's 6250, or I got the contract on my desk. I mean, we can say we don't need it and we can just chance it and hope nothing goes wrong, but it will add up quick if we have to call them.
But have you had a chance to talk to the chief and see if the chief thinks when any service contract, it's that gamble?
Yeah.
Are you going to need and weighing up possibility?
I spoke with Stacy on Friday after all this went down, and originally her and I had discussed the service contract, and I thought it was a little excessive, but when we had to call them out here to replace a sensor at the cost of $1,275, and then we replaced 3 components, which I was fortunately able to get at no cost. I started to see the possible costs that those could have if something happens. Knock on wood, nothing happens. They work great for the next 10 years, but the service contract includes an annual service as well. If we call them out to have an annual service, that's going to cost us probably $2,000 just to do the annual service. So, I mean, what do we do? Do we pay 3, which includes the annual service, and we pay an extra 1,000, nothing goes wrong? At least we knew we wouldn't have to pay anything, or do we pay the 2 and hope nothing goes wrong? And if something does, we pay a lot more.
Service already included in this budget as far as like under service for vehicles?
No.
Okay.
That's why I'm bringing it up now, because I want. What do you think is the best way to handle this? Do we get the service contract, make sure they're being serviced? Because here's the other thing: if the service contract, and it's my job to know, or Stacy's job to know, that once a year you got to call them and have them come service them. If for whatever reason we have a change of chiefs or whatever, and that doesn't get done, and something happens, somebody the stretcher fails, they fall off of it, the first thing they're going to look at is, did you get your service? And if we screwed up, we screwed up. Whereas if we can show regular maintenance, it's getting the annual service. I'm looking at it as as insurance for the town, just because that one maintenance for that one sensor was $1,275, and I know that the annual service is gonna be close to $2,000, so. One thing goes wrong, what? One thing goes wrong, I mean. It's fine, but I'm giving you the option.
And so if the recommendation for this equipment is that it is serviced once a year.
Yeah.
And the figure that we have for service once a year would be $2,000 each. We have two, so that would be $4,000. We need to. Which is giving me pause, but I'm also aware that the decision was made by the town. I look at.
No, it's made by the select board.
So, the select board. Okay, in your experience, and I'm sorry to ask you to talk, other places that have this equipment, do they have them serviced yearly? Do they have a service contracts?
Yeah, generally have a service contract annually. Because let's say, for instance, they come out and do the annual service and find something wrong, you're buying parts. You know, if you're spending the $3,000 and just getting a service contract. Not only is it covered, but they're here quickly. So it's next day usually. They come right out, but yeah, I would recommend it.
And I believe it includes batteries too, right? Because
Include
that,
batteries, yeah.
that I genuinely believe that was the issue with that truck, was the battery was bad.
It's a very technical piece of gear. There's a lot to it, but it's safe. It's much safer for the staff and the patient,
Okay.
so.
How much, I don't remember, I remember being at the meeting, but, as a community member, how much did this equipment cost? Or did it cost?
Install and everything was 27,000. It was $27,000 a piece.
Okay. How accurate do we think it, $3,000 per unit per service? Is that something we should?
I threw that number out there.
Like,
I have no idea. Yeah, I mean, it's in the ballpark. Like I said, the service guy came out and replaced one sensor and it was $1,275. That was the labor and the part. So that's just replacing a sensor. That's not the full maintenance and the service. So I just kind of ballparked it, but
In that neighborhood, you can get a real number for a structure, though.
yeah, no, Scott would give it to me, but
Yeah.
I just
Um,
maybe we're at a service contract.
anybody else from the, I will ask everybody, but I mean. On the board, any questions or thoughts on that?
I mean, I think, in my opinion, it would be worth having a service contract. So it's an insurance policy, it's. You know, this is your everyday vehicle that you drive around, it's, you know. Man, it has different use, different equipment. And, expensive for. Costs, repairs.
And if somebody is injured,
Yeah.
this is what, I can't help but thinking. I don't know whether or not the maintenance cost was considered when the decision was made to purchase this equipment, but at this point, that's neither here nor there.
We have it, we need to maintain it.
And we need to avoid lawsuits. This is what's going through my head. Questions? Yes.
Yes, question for Cameron, would this reduce the current proposal for maintenance and repair? The budget line?
Reduce it would
Not reduce it totally, but would it offset?
We're talking, it's an additional expense.
This is not something that was included in the initial budget.
Yeah, but if you're doing annual maintenance,
We were not budgeting for that, so.
I was not budgeting for that because until last, well, it's been an ongoing issue over the last several weeks. And we just got it rectified on Friday. You know, it's kind of like a new vehicle. We buy a new vehicle, we just assume it's gonna be great and you're not gonna have to do anything to it for a couple of years. Well, that's not the case. You know, it's no different than a fire truck or a plow truck. We could buy a brand new one this year, but there's still ongoing maintenance that I guess I didn't factor in because they're only, has it been a year and a half? But at the end of the day, again, when I was on the select board, and I can only speak for myself, when this was presented originally, nothing about maintenance was discussed. The only thing that was discussed was the cost of the unit and the cost to install. And shame on me for not thinking about the ongoing expenses, but again, like Sandra said, that's neither here or there. We have them and, you know, an argument could be made, well, why don't we just go back to the way things used to be? Well, it only takes one workman's comp case to jack up our insurance rate that's going to supersede what we're paying, or what I'm not making a recommendation here or there. I'm saying this is what it costs. We can chance it or we can't, but
From the nods of the heads, I think it's safe to say that no one on this board is looking to pass judgment or ding anybody up or suggest that poor decisions were made. It's just, this is where we're at and need to make a decision going forward. Did you have a question, Deb?
I did because, again, I'm very confused. I thought these treasures were just maybe turning a year and that the town, the select board approved one and somehow we ended up with two. The fact that they're not even a year old and they've caused this much trouble, that's very telling. Yeah, somebody dropped the ball somewhere. But that's neither here or there is what you're saying. When I hear that, I think, well, the only way to prevent making the same mistakes over and over again is to at least acknowledge that a mistake has been made.
I don't know right now
I think I did.
a mistake was made.
You were on
I
that
don't
board
know
too.
what the discussions were. I think that we need to learn from this and going forward, this body needs to take into consideration any ongoing costs that any expenditure
I agree.
may.
I agree, and what I'm saying is, I think there, I could be wrong, I thought there was ARPA money. And then I think there was other money. We somehow ended up with these two, and now I hear you. At least $4,000 a year for annual maintenance alone, not counting any repairs. And we don't know, I'm assuming that you guys don't know, I certainly don't know. What the lifetime warranty is it 1 year, 2 years, 3 years? How long, like on our capital improvement asset sheet, it would say, when we purchased this for $27,000, it's expected to last 15 years. Does anybody know how long these stretchers are expected to last and how frequently, besides annually, are we gonna be paying for and expect the price to keep going up like all the other prices?
I'd have to look at Gatsby to know what the actual life of something like that, an asset like that would be, but it's nowhere near 15 years.
So
I
we
mean, from a town standpoint.
I'd like to know, is this equipment become, or on the way to becoming standard equipment? I mean, do most, like, would you say 50%, less than 50%, more of,
Most ambulances use that equipment now.
so over 80% of the
Over
ambulances out
80%,
there?
Yeah, yeah, because it's so much safer than manual lift costs.
And are there different brands?
Not there's two brands, Stryker is certainly favored, the other one's a little bit more cumbersome,
So,
and they're equal. Same for money, so.
so over 80%
I would
of
say.
ambulance services have this equipment in all of the ambulances.
Yeah, definitely kind of standard equipment.
Standard equipment.
And with that said, when you buy anything, the life packs, we've got service contracts on those. Typically, and again, 2 years ago, I didn't understand the stuff in this town like I do now that I see it every day. When you buy a piece of equipment, a lot of times you have those service contracts, so it's kind of like a worry-free kind of thing. Because it covers that annual maintenance, and you don't have to remember to schedule that stuff. It's no different than us, like changing your oil or doing anything else, but fire trucks on an annual basis, they gotta be or you gotta have your hose tested, you gotta have your ladders tested, you gotta have your pumps tested. It's having them comes with a cost, and whether nothing had gone wrong with that one unit, they're not both bad. And it's not bad. We just had one issue that we had to figure out what it was. Had this been presented to us appropriately in the beginning, we wouldn't be having this discussion right now.
If service had been budgeted in the initial budget and purchase, then we would not be, but it wasn't, and we're learning.
I take it we only have so long to accept this service contract, like we can't do it down.
If you look at the date on that contract, I think it's from October. And that was when Stacy and I originally talked about it and didn't see the value in it until
Mhm.
3 calls later.
So
And I've already talked to Stryker, and from what I've been told, they'll just change the date and the price will stay the same. It's for a 12-month
is
period.
this a,
Huh?
Is it a 1-year contract? I'm sorry, Steiner. I didn't raise my hand, sorry, I apologize.
Yes, it's a 1-year service agreement.
and is it renewable at the same cost year after year? Do we don't know this, right?
I don't know. I got what I just passed around. It's sitting next to Peter.
So it could increase year after year. I guess I would say I'd like to do some due diligence, and I have a great deal of faith in the work that you do and in our chief, and certainly in Bob and his experience, but maybe we could cast our net a little bit wider as we give information to the community and look and see if over 80% of towns have this equipment. This is the way we're going, so I don't think it would be wise to say perhaps we should get rid of the equipment altogether. So if we're going to have this equipment, do most departments have the service plan? Or do most not? And maybe just to have that information as we make a decision. Um, I'm sorry, I don't know. This is the contract,
The quote, yeah, the proposal.
so it's 2 different amounts.
This is the head unit, and then there's the stretcher. So the power load and the power, what's the first thing called? The power,
Power
Power load and power cut.
I think they call it something different.
Pro, SDC Power Pro.
That's the head unit.
SDC Power Load.
No, the head unit's the power load, the power pro. It's the. Yeah,
Power cut.
So this total of $6,254 would be service contract for 2.
yeah, if you look there, it says 2 times 12. It's 2 units times. Is that information you think it would be reasonable to ask the chief, rescue chief to look into over the next week or so about what do other departments do? Maybe just do a sampling of 6-10 other departments, or is this, what's the best way to get this? Do you have power loads at Pace? Do you guys have service contracts on them? Well, there's one. I'll reach out to her and see if she can reach out to other services. I mean, at the end of the day, like I said, I'm not for or against it. If something breaks, we're gonna fix it, so it'll come out one way or the other. And hopefully nothing breaks and we don't have to pay anything, but. I mean, we had a truck,
Making a gamble one way or the other.
we had a truck out of service essentially for 2 or 3 weeks while we were battling this. And we can run it in manual until I discovered exactly how heavy you know, if you get into a call with a large patient, some of our people are not gonna be able to lift. Anyway,
Right, so what other people think about.
Yeah,
moving forward with
yeah, we
this?
can get the data.
Look at it all.
Mhm. Yeah. I think it's important to understand what other towns are doing. I don't need, like, the idea of adding more cost onto the town, but I don't want it to end up like so many other projects where we kick the can down the road and hope that nothing happens. It would be best to be proactive, but yeah, I'd like to know what other towns are doing.
Okay,
Does Turner have those?
Question.
yes,
There's a line item for rescue vehicles, repair and maintenance. 8,000, would this expense increase that line or would you on a new line?
It would actually. You go one of two places. Currently, the Striker Pro Care Service Plan this year was billed out to the medical line because that was a contract or an agreement that was in effect when I took over that I got the invoices for and paid for. But if it were me, when I put it into this budget, it would have gone under other professional services with the medical director payment for contracts. The actual maintenance line for rescue vehicle, that's tires and regular maintenance. Our oldest unit is a 2012. So, I mean,
so what?
on an average basis, so the service contracts, I would put under 504-480. Which is other, it's other professional services, which,
A little bit more than midway down page 8 for anybody.
yeah, I'm working on a different document than you, so 105-325, 504-480.
So that would take the amount from 2,000 to $8,254, is that correct? If we were to recommend the service contract,
Correct.
okay,
Another question is, that's,
yes.
it sounds like we've never budgeted for repairs. Construction, is that correct? Not a budget line?
So the first unit was installed in October of 2022, I believe. The second unit was installed actually, no, it was installed before that. It was before July. Second one was installed towards the end of 2022. Because I had just gotten here when the second one was getting installed.
So the question is whether we gamble.
So no, the previous town manager and it was not budgeted for in prior.
So the point I'd like to make, I can only speak for myself, budget committee in that time. I don't think we need to back up. Review this, but I think you should budget something for repair, whether it's routine maintenance or not, kind of thing,
Thank you.
and just do it. Yeah. So, tonight.
So my thought would be is that we gather a little bit more information, and that's just my thought, maybe we don't need to do that, to support the decision of adding the $6,254, because the question would be is if we have it serviced annually, we need to find out what that annual service would cost. Could you get that information as well?
I just wrote it down, yeah.
Okay.
I won't have it before Tuesday. You don't meet again unless you schedule it for meeting.
So minimally, we should plan to have it serviced. But then to look at, do we have just budget for service, or do we budget for the service contract? Which would make no sense this year. Should we make that decision on Tuesday?
Yeah, I'm gonna email Scott right now.
Okay. Thank you. Yes, Deb.
Can I ask a different question?
Sure.
I noticed I'm on page 7, 502, 260, which is closer to the end. I mean, closer to the bottom of the page. I believe that's other employee benefits. It shows an increase of $750.
So are we on, other safety rescue?
Uh, yes,
Okay,
towards the bottom of the page.
okay. Different copies, different page numbers, so I just wanted to make sure.
Yeah.
No, okay, I'm with you.
I think that's like for Thanksgiving and Christmas.
The other employee benefits of $750.
Yes,
Mm-hmm.
and I went back, I couldn't find it for fire. It's weird for the library, so could you just tell me how many employees is that for and how much each gift card is so that I can then go through the entire budget and try to figure it out? Cause it's $50 in one place and it seems to be like $32 and something per person in another place. And
I don't even know what line we're looking at. I was writing an email.
I guess the first question would be, is that, is that this is perhaps not something that is set by the town, by each department head, makes a proposal of what they. So
so
like the rest,
that's how it happened, or
I don't know,
I thought this was, oh,
but perhaps that the rescue chief, the department head of that department said, this is what I need for that. And the library said, this is what we need for this, so that different departments may do things differently. Um,
$25 for Christmas, I believe is what it equates to.
I can't
so
hear you.
so $25
$25
for Christmas is what that equates to, so I guess the question is, do we give $25 to every person in this municipality?
That was a request from rescue. My full-time and part-time employees, they get the cost of a turkey on Thanksgiving, which I give them $10 for a frozen turkey at Hannaford. And then they don't get $10, they get a gift card for $10. And then on Christmas, they get a $25 gift card, which is in the personnel policy handbook. Personnel, yeah.
And that's for the, that's for the office.
The office, public works, the library, the dump. Sorry, the transfer station.
So that $25 includes, does not include rescue.
Correct.
And does not include fire.
Correct.
Does fire get a gift card?
I couldn't find that in the budget, which also could.
So this request is from the rescue chief for her people. Currently, the way the personnel policy handbook is written, it's part-time employees and not per diem employees. However, many of our per diem employees work more than our part-time employees, so. For policy, so she made a request above and beyond, which is at $750 an hour.
So perhaps the fire chief. I don't want to speak, so either the fire chief did not feel this was necessary, or perhaps the fire chief was not aware of this practice.
He didn't ask,
He didn't know.
she asked.
I'm gotcha. Thank you. Any other questions or recommendations? As I understand it, we, as a select board, will make a final recommendation on what, if any, we're going to add for service for the striker units, and we'll make that recommendation on Tuesday after we have a little bit more information. Yes.
I noticed, because I was comparing the budget, the proposed budget that I had with the last financial quarter report. And what I didn't find in rescue were the contracted services and technology lines. And I heard you, Cameron, say that you're kind of still somehow it makes sense to you and that's fine, but are those expenses that you had since December 2023 covered now in a different area and it's not showing up in the rescue budget? Or was it mistakenly left out?
So when I wrote my budget last year, I was still fairly new in the position, working off of a account list that was created by a former town manager. If we have a computer crash and it's within the overall budget and we can absorb that cost, I still bill it to the right line that I've created, technology, so that it's accurately reported. However, it may not have been budgeted last year because, say, that wasn't an anticipated cost, but it happened. So when I pay it or when I bill it in or put it into the system, I put it in an accurate line so that you as the taxpayer or anybody else can see what was spent in that line. And so a year from now or 2 years from now, I can look back historically and know what was spent on technology as opposed to, I'll just throw it in the supply line and call it good. Yeah.
Gotcha. Thank you. Moving forward to public safety, animal welfare. Any items that anyone would like to address? Yes, please.
Is 25 what we're currently offering an hour for the ACL?
It is my understanding that, currently it is a stipend position. I'm not sure if this was the intent for this to be continue to be a stipend position or to basically an hourly position.
I'm looking for an amount of money okay, so like it originally when Robert was here was minimum wage. I posted the position multiple times at minimum wage and it didn't attract anybody. So I made it a $250 stipend, which was well within the budget. Bob and I took a few calls. Heather did it for a while. Peter's been doing it. And unfortunately, I don't know what's going on in this town, but it is requiring roughly on average about 4 hours per week to handle animal welfare calls. So in light of trying to propose or trying to figure out what we were going to do, this was an estimate that I based this number off of. I think Sumner currently pays, I sat through one of their board meetings where their road commissioner is actually the animal control officer right now. And at the meeting I was at, he was adamant that he would not do it for any less than $400 a month, which is a stipend, which comes up to $4,800 a year. So the fact that they got their road commissioner as the animal control officer, and currently we have a selectman because we can't find anybody else. I'm thinking that budget-wise, $25 an hour, 4 hours a week is within a reasonable.
So this demonstrates what it averages out to be, but it would still be paid out as a stipend position.
Yeah.
However, if we were to find somebody, hopefully there's someone out there that would like this job, who would prefer. We could work it out. It just gives us an overall number available to.
Yeah, I need to know what's available to pay whomever I'm able to find. That person may want it hourly, that person may want it as a stipend. Ironically, the $5,200 comes out to $433.3333 but that's because I budgeted it based off that $25 figure.
My only concern with this area is that the emergency vet treatment, we budgeted $500, and what I would ask is what did we spend last year, because I believe it's more than that, and then we increased that line to whatever we spent last year.
Current year we've spent right around $1,250 in that line.
So current year being 3/4 of the year.
Yeah, because we have about 3 months left of the year.
So if we do the math, it's $1,200, $1,600. So my recommendation is so as to be a little bit more accurate, if we would predict that this year was cost us $1,600, that we should budget for that amount for next year. It'd be really nice if we didn't spend it all, but
What was that number?
$1,600 under emergency vet treatment.
So that would make that line 5,050.
Um,
5,050. That includes the shelter fees, the cat, because cats are billed differently than dogs. They're charged per. And then the emergency vet treatment. Which,
Go from 500 to 1,600, which would make the professional and tech line. That number all the way on the right would go from 3,950 to 5,050. And again, hoping that we don't need to spend that. Any other recommendations?
I agree. I think it only makes sense that we budget for what we're spending.
Here.
It's no-brainer.
Public safety streetlights, public safety hydrants, public safety emergency management. Any recommendations, questions, concerns there? It was nice to see the streetlights going down. That was great.
it's because of the conversion to LEDs.
That's always a good thing. So that moves us on to parks, recreation, the recreation committee.
So just so that you're aware, I had taken this last year was split into Parks Rec Youth Programs and Parks Rec Committee. It's a royal pain in the butt when I'm trying to do APs to have two separate accounts to remember which one it goes into. So I took everything from youth programs and just rolled it into Rec Committee, and I can rename that to youth programs and whatever, but having it into two different accounts just didn't make any sense.
So is it listed on?
If you look on the next page, you'll see those are all zero.
So if we look down at youth programs, those all say zero.
And those costs are now incorporated into this cost or this sheet.
So the total for last year, help me with the math,
26,060 plus 560, 36,620. 36,620.
so this year, 32,730 is a decrease.
Correct.
Okay, so even though things are moving into different line items, it's a net decrease.
Correct.
Okay. Again, good job. Community organization and events. Buckfield. I can go back. Go ahead.
I'm on, I don't know, I worked with this document.
I'm gonna say I'm using a different document, so
It's. I have to use mine.
Yeah.
I'm looking at the one that I got at the last meeting, it's page 11.
Okay.
And it's 506,670. And it says funds to build a new dugout, recreation share of 0 turn mower. Do y'all see that? So, again, I was using the quarterly report. And we had approved the 6,780, but we have, according to the quarterly report, spent 24,000. So we're in the.
sorry, I don't mean to interrupt you. I've addressed this at several meetings. The existing, if you run an expense report from Trio right now, it includes all of the expenses from 22, 23 that were paid in 23, 24, which is why when I do those quarterly reports, I have a separate sheet that backs those totals out. So if you actually look at the sheet with the Buck logo on it, It's the first page on all of my financial reports. It has those columns that for a while were confusing people. It has a column of what's been expended according to our expense sheets, and it has a column that's less all the 22, 23 expenses. And we're not over, yeah, we're not over budget in those. Because we had money that was carried over into last year to fund resurfacing the fields, and all that stuff was under contract at the end of the fiscal year, but it didn't get paid until 23, 24. So that's why Trio's seeing it as it being paid out of this year, but it's actually not. Yep, our oldest zero turn for the town. So we use the zero turn for the cemeteries, we use it for the municipal center, we use it for obviously the ball fields. And I believe, in my opinion, so it's up to you, it's fair to have all the departments that benefit from it share in the expense of that. So the cemeteries are taking a big portion of it because really the cemeteries require the most mowing and do the most damage to our equipment, followed by rec, the municipal center, because we have this huge field in this whole area. So I propose spreading the cost of that piece of equipment amongst the departments that are utilizing it. Public Works run it, but the actual cost of the equipment.
I know the machine, so it doesn't get used in the library, so it's not in the library account, but you're saying the cemetery takes the bulk of it. Versus the 3 rec field. Oh, okay, I get it. I'll wait on turns. But I have another question. About the increase to the $700 increase to 40 porta potty line.
Yep.
And is that from Nickerson's raising their price or that?
Nope, it's because the number of sports teams that we have and the fields that we have to utilize. Soccer season, we have to have a porta potty up at Bessie Field because we do the younger kids play soccer up there. So we have to have a porta potty available to the people that are there. So we have to have 2 porta potties in that location for a couple of months, which adds to the cost. We have a porta potty down here during soccer season. We have porta potty down at the rec field all season. So from spring until fall. So we're essentially between the 3. We have 3 porta potties at any given 2 to 3 at any given time. And the cost this year was more than what I had budgeted for last year. And that's why I increased it based off the rates.
And then I have one question. Anybody else think about this?
You stole my question right there.
Okay.
My notes.
I just, again, the one I'm looking at, professional tech line, the 504, 433, playoff fee. Under youth program was $1,000. But under park and recreation, there was nothing, so are you saying on the new sheet you've combined them?
So I've moved it from the other one and increased it by $500 because the cost of umpire fees is the $1,500 is the accurate figure.
And then my last question has to do with the railroad bed. I believe that's maintenance repairs 506, 660 railroad bed, gravel and signage. And do we know what signs those are, or what gravel that is? I know that throughout the year there was an issue, but I wonder if that's gonna go down.
This was a while ago when I wrote this, and Weldon had been talking about certain signage. I can't remember exactly on the spot what it was. However, the town of Buckfield has not put any gravel into the railroad bed since pre-COVID. And I know this used to be a hot button item at town meeting where $500 got put in a year. And since we've neglected it, I don't say neglected it, but since we have not done anything for the last 4 years, I think it's time that we probably set aside a little bit of money and do some work. I'm still in conflict, and Weldon is too, with grading the railroad bed, because without coming up with a solution for the overgrowth, sending that grader down there is going to cost us in lights and mirrors and everything else, because the trees are coming into the road and it'll break things on our grader. That's why we haven't done that. But at a minimum, we can get our dump trucks down there and spread out some gravel in some of those low spots. But I don't, currently in that state, I don't see how we're gonna be able to grade it anytime soon.
And the signage is for what?
I can't recall what Weldon and I had discussed back in January. There was something associated with signs, or was it something we talked about? Something to do with when the railroad bed's closed.
We're gonna be included signage, but
So I think. To make sure people are aware of appropriate usage, that we should probably mark the Buckfield line. Um,
Okay.
I don't recall all of
I
that, but there
agree
we
with that one.
motorized vehicles, what
What was allowed, what time of year, or
exactly,
Yeah.
so
Okay,
making sure that people are aware of expectations and then.
that's to me now, and I think that's true, and I agree with prior. Especially because we had residents here, but that section, and I'm pointing that way, but by the town garage going towards
cell phone?
South Pond has huge things. Thank you.
Thank you. So community organization events, social services. The church, I know that there, I know there's an increase there, and I'm aware of that broken window.
Yeah, there's a window that's broken in the front, and Judy keeps bringing up that tree that needs to be cut as well.
So there are some repairs that must be made.
Yeah.
And going forward this year, I'm hoping that the Church on the Hill Committee can get together and concerned citizens can bring their thoughts and concerns and ideas together, so
Plaster.
by next year, we can have a comprehensive plan for the church going forward. Yes, Cecilia.
I was just curious about the $300 decrease in the community events committee fund.
So this is actually, it's because I switched lines. Where are we? Community library services. So last year, this miscellaneous line was where the flags were for graves. So I utilized the general supply line and notated Memorial Day flags. So I moved that $900 up there. The $600 that I proposed for community events committee. Now that the committee's active and they're doing things like the Thanksgiving, the $600 is basically an amount of money for them to utilize
With, yeah.
to fund those events until, obviously this doesn't include Labor Day, because Labor Day has their own checking account, but as Viv noted in a meeting when we changed it to the community events committee, that stuff is specifically for Labor Day. So that's what that $600 is, but it's just confusing because I switched lines.
Yeah, thank you.
Yes.
Yeah, I had those questions too, and I'm wondering, not that I don't want. Or anything, but didn't you just get all brand new flags last year?
Every year.
Okay, and then the other thing is. The checking account has the community day, the community events committee has a checking account that has $10,000 in it. Then there's a trust fund interest, then there's the principal, and I didn't see anything in the local revenue, so I don't know why we have to. Generate money.
Because this is for any event other than Labor Day. Every fund that you just brought up, you had brought up at another meeting and specifically said it was for Labor Day. Oh, yes, you did.
Well, so.
But this is. Yes. Labor Day.
So this allows there to be money available for events other than. Are you feeling that those funds could be used for other things?
I'm saying I'd like to see that too, because I don't believe I said that, because I've known this information for so long that, but I could have been so tired that I misspoke. But yeah, I mean. When. I think it was last fall, we were gonna get together and try to do something, and didn't do anything at all. I raised the issue of the money then. So I'm just saying. That's my opinion.
So you feel confident that the money that is in that account has it's been clearly stated that that is.
Both the trust fund, which was the $5,000 from the bicentennial committee, I believe that was donated specifically says Labor Day. The checking account specifically on every financial document that we've had since before I was here said it was for Labor Day. And then we changed it to the community events committee, and the concern was that that money was specific to those purposes. Currently in its state, the Thanksgiving dinner, the community dinner that we did, and I'm not saying that they're going to go out and fund the whole entire event, but the way that event, trunk or treat, what else did we do? Those two events anyways, that was all donations and money out of pocket by the volunteers and other people that they could solicit, which is great when they can do that, but occasionally there's things that need to be purchased. So I was trying to give them a way to be able to purchase something that they need rather than have to, right? So that was the thought process behind that.
$600.
Correct.
Yes, so then the question becomes, I agree, I'll go along with this. If there's a profit made, where will the money go? Where will the revenue go? So say they take that 600 and do a fundraiser. And they make 6,000, where does the revenue go?
Well, in that case,
If all that other money is just Labor Day.
so these events don't typically raise money. It's typically a community event that costs money. If they had if people made donations or whatever, that would come before the select board, and I guess at that point it would be the select board's determination of where to put that money. Is that a fair?
That sounds fair.
I think that sounds right.
Um, Other questions, recommendations? Within the community. Okay.
Oh, is it-
Sorry.
Oh, yeah.
Looking at the librarian line, 501-130.
Mhm.
So the $20,630 is that's based on this current pay
Yep.
note here, $18.09 an hour, yeah.
3 cents, yeah.
Oh, sorry, 3 cents. So this MMA survey was just some information seeking we did, but is not actually being applied to wages.
Correct. So I put that throughout on all the departments. After talking to Kathy, because I had originally proposed an increase, she asked me not to. She felt that her current wage was fair and that she requested, do I think that this is based off the director's request.
Mhm.
So that's why it's there. I did leave this here for your information in case you disagree with her.
Mhm.
But that's why that is like that.
At some level, I disagree, but I don't want to get into a smackdown with the library. Whatever reason.
Mhm.
We don't go there. Exactly. Yes.
I have questions about the same thing. It says the document I'm looking at says substitute library assistants, library aides paid. 12 hours a week, if I'm on the right line, or the 12 hours a week is the assistants. My pages are broken up from year to year, so.
So it looks like they're asking for 12 hours a week at $15.99 for the library assistant.
Mhm.
And 8 hours a week at $14.15 for
The-
library aides.
Yeah.
And so that amount of money together would equal that 15,870.
Mhm.
And the town manager gave some information above to show that these figures are below.
Yeah, I don't wanna get in a smackdown with the library, you said, but I have strong reservation.
I
guess I'd like more information.
Can I give more information before I just
Of course,
give you my?
yeah.
So this was a request at the library directors for primarily programming at the library, which they do quite frequently, is the request for the eight extra hours a week was to help with that, because currently it's either or, and she felt that the help was needed. With that said, this budget of this library, even at I believe it's an increase had significant increases in revenues that bring the actual amount to be taxed and assessed lower than what it was last year. So there's the revenue that is being proposed. Expenses are pacing the revenue, and actually revenue is exceeding it.
Cost us this year,
Is less than this,
it's less than what it cost us.
even with these.
Even with these increases, because the amount of revenue they've generated has gone up significantly. They're making a lot more money than they used to.
I would be interested in, at least for the librarian position, matching the cost of living increase for this past year, which was 3.2%. So if I'm doing my math right, which I very well could not be, so somebody please check me. That would be an increase of $660.16 for a line total of $21,290.
Really, at the library.
At the librarian. At least to match the cost of living increase over the past year.
Can we round that up to 665, so it's not 660.16?
Huh?
If she's requested an order, well. She might have a reason. We might want to buy her.
Yeah, it's offered.
Mhm.
Need a mic or different tax.
Something, we don't know the reason. So I'd hate to overstep those boundaries.
Mhm.
I can talk to Kathy tomorrow.
Please. Thank you.
So just for the
That she's not opposed to it. I could wholeheartedly support a cost of living increase.
Yes.
So changing that, if she agrees to it, that's 665, that adjusts 502,235 FICA to 2305. And 502,240 Medicare to 540. And again, I rounded up so that they're even numbers because pennies are miserable.
Sounds good to me.
Um, Facilities. Building. Energy. Any of those? So. Does the board have questions or recommendations? Yes.
Why is the internet line 0?
So I often forget about this, but last year I built it up to general. So the internet we get through the main state library, and it's a relatively minimal cost for the full year. So this year I built it to general. I don't know why. I just think because there was nothing in internet and I just forgot, but you could take $4,000 off the general and move. I think it's 200 or 299 a year. But it's just moving numbers.
That's up under supplies, generally, correct?
Correct. That's where I built it last year.
Included in the $4,000, which remains constant from last year.
Because I don't have a monthly bill for the internet, so I often forget them.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure, like, it wasn't forgotten.
We're not taking the internet.
It says phone tax and INT at rate above electricity.
Yeah, so that's just for phone. Because
Not fax.
right, because 505, 500 is generic across the board. So whether it's public works or solid waste, it's always 505, 500. So for those departments that do include fax and internet, it's all included in.
Yes.
$2,000 for the building. Do you know what that's for? Is that for like What's that for?
Any maintenance, whether that be painting, whether that be a door breaks and needs to be repaired, we have to anticipate for it because if something happens and we don't budget for it, then there's no money in the budget for it. And I believe it's been 2,000 for the last 2 years, well, minus the mowing last year, but it's stayed relatively the same.
Do you know, do they usually use that 2,000 or has it just been accumulating in the savings?
It doesn't accumulate because what we do when we designate, when the select board just determines what that amount is after the vote on what to delegate from fund balance. If like, say if we don't expend this year, it falls to fund balance, and then next year when you make your recommendation, that money's going back into offset. So you're basically putting it in the budget because it has to be in the budget in order to spend it. If it falls, then you're appropriating fund balance the next year. So you're putting it back in. Does that make sense? It's kind of like raising benefits for an employee if somebody quits. If you don't expend it this year, it lapses and then your fund balance appropriated. So it just comes back and it comes off what we tax and benefit.
I didn't see in their report, folks, and read or something.
I don't think anything, we've been lucky this year, but there hasn't been any needs for repairs. Obviously the building was painted at $10.
Yeah.
So,
What I guess.
yeah, I mean, that would have cost more than the $2,000 that we raised, so.
Absolutely.
Well, it wasn't a gift because it did cost us $10. Publicly declared, but.
A generous offer.
Right, and then the last question I have with the library is the electricity did not go up. Whereas it seems like it did in all the other places because the electrical increases. So
Electricity is really hard to budget because for a building like this that uses a large amount of electricity in that building, it can fluctuate from any given month. The library relatively stays consistent every month. And last year I was under on a few accounts, so I adjusted accordingly. So that's probably why you're seeing that.
So we are now at debt service and I would like to make a motion that we take a no more than 10-minute break. At this point.
I will second that motion.
All right, all in favor?
Azalea, aye.
Well, I,
You're right.
Sandra, aye, and we are, what is the word, in recess? For no more than 10 minutes. So we will. So we have 10 minutes, so, thank you. Thank you very much, I know that's still serving me. But I need to do it. Nice.
Cheers for coming on.
Yeah, well, let's get good on it.
He's wondering. He's what you're doing that, Cameron.
Sure, it ain't over.
What happened?
Can I peel my sticker?
Oh, absolutely. If you want.
So tell me, that's it. I'm not buying, why? It's like about the hot shoes.
Yeah.
All right. We're unmuted.
Peter.
He left for the
He left.
evening.
Is everybody else set? We're back on.
Yes,
Do I have to make a motion to start the meeting again?
you can just say that we're back.
Okay, we are back. At 6:48. And we are going to look at debt service. And I trust that you've gone through and that the map is appropriate on all of these.
Everything's unchanged. Judy had already dropped out a while ago.
I have a question, yes, or,
Yeah,
the last one, the reweld.
Yep.
I understand that we paid the 45. But there's also $1,041.37 in the mini revale reserve.
No, there's not. 1,000? Oh, you said $1,000? Okay. Yeah, left over.
37 cents in the reserve, so my question is, if it's all paid off. Even this debt service is gone, the bill's paid, is that correct?
The last payments this year, but so the first payment was taken out of the mini revale. That's what the 1,000, I don't have the figure in front of me, but that and the interest. The second year, the $45,000 was raised and $5,000 was taken out of that mini revale to get to the total that it's at now. But that first payment was taxed in 22-23. The second one that we actually had to tax was this current fiscal year. Plus the 50,000 we took out of that was the full amount of the contract, which is why it's fallen off. So there is still some money in that revale account. But it sits there until.
Well, that's why I'm bringing it up, because I would like the board to consider that there's still $1,000 sitting there. The bill's primarily paid, and why not either at some point during this process, put it into a reserve or put it into local revenues to offset other expenses. Do something with it, so it just doesn't sit there on the books.
so could we make a note at a future meeting to discuss what we're going to do with the negative rebound reserve? Yes,
So there's two things to that.
okay,
One, you don't have the authority to do anything with it. The town has to. You can make the recommendation. But two, you also got to consider that 5-10 years, you may have to do another eval. Are you going to save for it, or are you going to tax like we did this time too? So that's something to consider about too before you make a recommendation. It's not much, but it's a good start.
did this already go to use that to pay for the revale that's taken place, you know?
They authorize us to use the original 40, what was it, 45, or the first 50, and then the 5,000 of the other 45. The additional 1,000 wasn't factored in. But you would have to ask, if you want to move that somewhere else, you'd have to ask them for permission to do that, because they allocated that money to that account for that purpose.
And when is the bill for this final 45 due?
It'll be at the tail end of the project, probably closer to December. But that money's already been raised and appropriated. So, I mean, you could take the $1,000 out and then have the $1,000 extra that you've raised and appropriated and let it lapse to fund balance. I guess that's one way to work around it.
Or leave it in as reserve, either way, I just wanna do something with those. Lost.
Well, would it be lost?
Well,
If we didn't do anything, it's gonna stay there till next year. So we just have to decide if we want to have a warrant article asking the town to do something with it, or we leave it be in next year. Is that correct?
Well, I'm just thinking, even if it's a decade from now, If you put $10,000 away a year for that purpose, knowing that we don't want to get back into the boat that we were in that 10 years, roughly 8 to 10 years, we may want to do another revale, depending on where housing markets are and
Yes, look at putting together a schedule of
Mhm.
doing
What that
revals
looks
that we
like.
recommended
Yeah.
intervals, so. We have a reserve account for revals, if we. Leave that be and next year look at what we may want to add to it.
Mhm.
I think it minimally, if you leave it in there, you should say mini revale for what year?
Or we have to do a warrant article to change.
I don't even like the fact that we got to work out warrant article items anyways to make sure that all the reserve accounts are what they're designated for. If we're going to
Right.
combine some of them like rescue equipment and rescue ambulance and fire equipment, fire ambulance and consolidate. One of the recommendations would be to change the name of that account from mini revale because there's nothing mini about what we're doing. And revaluation reserve is really the proper term because you never know what year you're gonna need to do a reval. It could be 15 years from now, depending on the growth of the town.
So given the amount of work that we have to do and our time constraints. Are you thinking that we should have a discussion about changing the names or putting together warrant articles to make any changes this year, or these are things we should discuss to make sure we are prepared to present those warrant articles to the community next year?
When I put the warrant together for this year, which is what you'll have to finalize after your public hearings. If there's any if I have any recommendations for what I would like you possibly approve to put on the warrant, they'll be included on that so that you can either say, no, that's not worth it or whatever. So I'll make sure that it's on the warrant so that when you go through it, we can have that discussion.
So you'll
Everything's in front of us.
That in what you propose to us, so we can have that discussion.
Correct.
That's me. Thank you. Does anybody have any questions or recommendations about the debt service expenses? So put that on the hour. Maybe on the public work. Questions or recommendations? For the proposed figures for public works.
I was just curious, under seasonal. For the summer help, do you know how many hours a week we'd be employing seasonal help for?
We're skipping over public works complex. Sorry,
Oh.
oh,
You're good.
Doesn't look like any.
I heard public works and
So complex
right
is
for
good.
that.
So for the seasonal, typically through that summer, spring season, we factor in about 40 hours a week.
Okay.
Because the cemetery itself, it takes 2 to 3 days to mow.
Mhm.
And then it's usually 2 days to mow and then 3 days to weed whack. And then by the time you're done, you're starting all over again.
Yeah.
So that may be made up of 2 part-time employees or 1 full. We don't have to offer benefits to a seasonal employee. I hope that answers your question. Average of 40 hours for that
Okay.
time period.
Yes.
Well, that was one of my questions. The other questions is, since the pay scale on that seasonal help is $16 to $20 an hour. So Public Works will not be doing that. This is like contracted seasonal help, because I thought there was discussion earlier about Public Works doing that, and if so, there is no one working in Public Works. They're all getting like $23.50 and above.
My understanding is that. To answer your question, that when we was contracted out.
We are taking it.
The experiences. Led to making the decision that Public Works is going to take it back, but they are going to hire summer help.
Oh,
To do that work.
Is gonna hire
Mhm.
people.
So we're gonna have one of our employees that's gonna help with this work, but it's gonna require 2 people. So one of our current employees, which will fall under their existing line, we'll do that as well as whatever temporary seasonal help that we get.
Okay. Yeah, another question?
Yes.
And it's up on the heating fuel line,
Okay.
under utilities,
Mm-hmm.
don't know what page you're on.
Are you going back to complex?
Yeah.
And then what?
125, 385, 505, 525. Yep.
And it stayed exactly the same. And I saw somewhere else in Public Works, it was like $4 a gallon, and then I'm like, are we still using the oil from the transfer station? Is there less oil or we're paying more? Why is it staying exactly the same?
Because that's what we budget for in lieu of not collecting enough waste oil at the transfer station. We still have to get oil for hot water over there anyways. But if we don't collect what's needed at the transfer station, we have to burn number 2 instead. So that's what we budget for in case that happens. And this year we have spent money out of that because the influx of oil has been not that great.
Then the very next line under maintenance again, there's that 5,000, so it was in, I believe, the library and it's in here. Can we just consider that each department has a maintenance and repair contingency of 5,000, each department? Cause it's here again.
As a,
It has to be in the department. If something happens and you have to do maintenance and repair to the building, you have to have a line with it in there.
So it is like a contingency.
It is, and every year if we don't spend it, it falls and then it gets reappropriated.
Thank you.
so just in case.
But it has to show up in the budget in order for us to spend it.
And then I'm sorry,
No.
what is a road assistant?
Our,
501.
that's our, so one of our drivers is the assistant road foreman. So if Weldon's out, he's the one that's in charge. If Weldon's sick, he's in charge of it.
The position.
And when we flip over to the next page, if no one has any other questions. Is the increase to the overtime line due to the amount of hours spent in overtime? Or is it, so how many hours are we budgeting for overtime? And does that include the increase to the wages? One or the other, or both?
The increase is based on the increased wages. If you look at like public work, road commissioner, the proposed wage is $27.50. The road commissioner currently makes $25.75, I believe. So that's $2 extra an hour for him that needs to be factored into overtime.
Which is. We're not experiencing a lot more overtime than we used to, right?
We are, we're not that.
This year was a mild year, but that doesn't mean
So
that
no.
next year will be.
Had an increase in it.
That's okay, thank you.
Yeah.
This year was also the first time that I adjusted in the past. We had the overtime line, but then when we paid out overtime, it was all coming out of like the road commissioner line. So then it would show the road commissioner line way over budget, but nothing was taken out of overtime. But in the end, it balanced itself out. So now when the guys work overtime, say it's 6 hours actually gets deducted from that. So after this fiscal year, I'll have a better understanding on how much to the dollar of overtime we've spent because that's how it's being accounted for now. I started that this fiscal year.
That'll become important should there be more storms and more FEMA and so on and so forth for record keeping, just so that you know, right?